Yeah.
Mia I actually helped on Mia's campaign for governor when she was running in the primary. I was so proud to work for her. She's an awesome person, but she is a trailblazer. She was the first woman to represent House District 79 and Senate District 22, and the first Black woman ever to run for governor of South Carolina. Senator McLeod is known for her bipartisan work in and through state government. McLeod served South Carolina State Representative David Beasley, later Republican governor, as a page, and worked for the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce before earning her Juris Doctorate at the USC School of Law. Senator McLeod launched a statewide violence against women initiative for Republican South Carolina Attorney General Charlie Condon, and was later appointed by the Democratic Governor Jim Hodges to direct the State Office of Victims Assistance. She's a proud mother of 2 young adult sons. She represents Senate District 22 in Richland County and serves as Senate Judiciary, Medical Affairs, Rules Correction, and Penology and Family and Veteran Services Committee. Welcome, Mia. And she's
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be with all of you today.
Great. Tell us what it was like being the first.
Of what? Which one? It's been very interesting, very lonely, and very enlightening. To be the first woman to run for, I was accustomed to being the first. As you said, I was the first woman to represent House District 79, first woman to represent Senate District 22. But I didn't realize until I got ready to announce, and the reporter who was doing the story asked, did some research on her own and found out that I am the first woman to run, the first Black woman rather, to run for governor of South Carolina. And that was news to me. It's something that I really had not thought about in terms of being the first. I said all the time on the campaign trail, I'm not, I wasn't running. I think Angela Davis's quote sums it up. She said, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. And so that was adapted to, of course, the Serenity Prayer. And it really summed up why I've run, not just for governor, but for the House and Senate as well. And I knew what I was getting when I ran for the House, because before running for the House, I lobbied independently for 8 years. And so, I got to work on issues that I cared about: education, higher education. I wrote the legislation that was able, and we got it codified. And when I checked, as I was running for governor, I checked, and by 2021, I believe, we had gotten over $104 million for our historically Black colleges and universities to share equally from the South Carolina Education Lottery. And so, the things that I lobbied for and against, I'm super proud of. I lobbied against school vouchers and did some work for the city of Columbia. And so those are the things that kind of piqued my curiosity, but it wasn't until Anton Gunn was appointed by President Barack Obama to direct Health and Human Services for the Southern region that he asked me to help him look for somebody who could run for his seat. And he was my representative at the time. He was doing great things, innovative things that I had not seen or heard from any other legislators. And I wanted those things to continue. My sons were in grade school then, and lobbying gave me the freedom and flexibility to be there for them. I was newly divorced and had never considered running for office, never thought about it. It wasn't on my wish list or my bucket list. And so I really kind of rolled up my sleeves and tried to help Anton find someone to run who would continue the things that he had started. And long story short, that person ended up being me. I did not know, I had no clue what my chances would be since I had not ever put my name out there to run. And it was at that time a swing district. And he had lost the first time he ran, but he ran, he ran and won again and won the second time. And so, I remember going into Kershaw County. I represent Richland and Kershaw counties. I live in Richland County, but I represent both. And, I had people who, when they saw me, refused to shake my hand and refused to even come to their door, or they yelled through the door, are you a Democrat? And I'm like, I'm running as a Democrat, yes. And, had the door slammed in my face. And so those are the things that I wanted to work hard to change, but it wasn't until I got in and I realized that even though I thought I knew a lot about, I did know a lot about the process. I thought I knew a lot about the people, but who were serving at that time in my party, and those who weren't serving in the Democratic Party. But I was wrong. I did not know them as well as I thought, because when my district was targeted, my swing district was targeted right out of the gate. So it's like I came in and had to fight from day one because my swing district was targeted. They packed my district with Black voters. And I did some research, because when I took that reality to my minority caucus leader at the time, he was like, well, we're just going to kind of monitor it and see what happens. I'm like, okay, but can we really afford to do that? And why are they doing that? Oh, they're doing it because, that's typically what incumbents like to see. They want to know that, they have their districts are safe for their reelections. And I'm like, okay, but it's not about them. It's not about incumbency protection. It's about protecting the people of South Carolina. So I kind of parted ways with my caucus very early on that issue, and did my own research. And I discovered that in all of the southern states, redistricting was part of the Republicans' national strategy to blacken swing districts like mine for 3 reasons. And the first reason was to further marginalize the voices of the minority, to create a permanent Republican majority stronghold, and to just make sure that Democrats don't have a fighting chance when it comes to these elections. And when we fast forward to now, they've accomplished all of that and more. We saw that when we lost Vincent Shaheen in the Senate, who had run for governor twice. So it wasn't like he didn't have the relationships and the name recognition in the district and throughout the state, but he still lost in 2020. And we saw that when we lost Glenn Reese in Spartanburg County in the Senate. We lost Mandy Powers Norrell, who had just run on the ticket with James Smith in 2018. We lost Laurie Funderburk. And so, we are still feeling the effects of that, of course, because we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate now. And I'm just tired. I'm not one to really take a lot of crap from people without fighting back. That's just in my DNA. And so I fought back and I won. I won my reelection in a swing district in 2014, and then again in 2020 in 2016 when I ran for the Senate and won. I took on some pretty tough issues right here in Richland County where I live. One was the elections debacle of 2012. So that, coupled with the redistricting fight, really put me at odds with my caucus long term. And so when I say leadership is lonely. It can be a very lonely place. That's what I mean. I came in thinking that I was going to have this village, and all of us thought, we're working towards the same goals, which was to improve our communities and to help people in our districts thrive, and to help them navigate this process that we call, politics, especially during the pandemic, when we saw that people weren't able to get their unemployment benefits, when we saw that they were being forced back to work for slave wages, what I consider slave wages. That's when it really got real for me and so many others, because I worked harder. We weren't at the State House because of the pandemic, but I was working around the clock right here from my house, like all day, every day, trying to help people navigate and help them get what they needed when they needed it, so that we could hopefully save lives, get people vaccinated when those became available, get people medical help when they needed it. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to do as much as I would have liked because government was in the way, and it was intentional. And to see my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, to be honest, not fight for the people was really bothersome to me. And it just took my my focus to a whole different level. And that is ultimately why I ran for governor. I do think that we need to, in South Carolina, we have to do something different. We keep saying we want something different. We want change. We want people elected in these spaces at every level of government who actually care about the people they represent, but we keep electing and re-electing the same people. And that's on both sides of the aisle. I am not a party person, so you're not going to hear me highlight all of the great things that Democrats are doing or all of the bad things that Republicans are doing, because I've seen both from both parties, and that should concern all of us. I think it's time that we get back to voting for people, and not just people who look like us, whether that's because of race or gender, or but people who are aligned with us in terms of our values and our shared vision for what South Carolina can and should be. And so that's what motivates me. It's what drives me. But I will tell you that I am not your typical elected official. I never refer to myself as a politician, because in my opinion, politicians are those who protect themselves at the expense of the people that they represent. And so I do believe that I am a public servant. I know that I'm a public servant because I am still making the sacrifices that I've had to make for the last 12 years just to serve. And people don't understand that, I don't think. I think they think that, when we get elected, we got all this money coming towards us, and we've got all this power, and, we've got the world opens up to us. But the opposite has been true for me. I was making six figures before I ran. I am no longer making six figures, and haven't been for some time. And I have struggled financially. And the reason that I continue to serve, I have continued to serve, is because money doesn't drive me. Of course, I need to make money to take care of myself and my family. I've been divorced now for much longer than I've been serving. But I do think it's important to have people in these spaces who actually care and have compassion and empathy for the people that they represent. And, there are so few of us actually who fit that description. And that is what motivates me every day to just do more and enlighten and engage the people I represent more, so that they can help me fight, because I can't do it by myself. But the challenges that I've faced in leadership have been many. Of course, I've been called everything but a child of God, because I have been what some perceive as fearless in the face of much adversity and much opposition. And it's not that I'm fearless. I do feel fear. I've been able to move beyond it and do what I need to do for the people, even if I'm afraid. And I've had to stand alone many times, too many times, but I know that that was preparation because of the fights that I've taken on. I've never been one to shy away from a fight. I won't start a fight typically, but have never been afraid to speak my mind and to roll up my sleeves and do whatever I need to do and say what needs to be said when others have not had the courage to do that. And so those are the things that I'm most proud of. When the young lady at Spring Valley was thrown out of her desk by a school resource officer, Spring Valley wasn't in my House district, and I was actually in the House at the time running for the Senate, and had just announced that I was running for the Senate. And I had colleagues, even in my delegation, colleagues who looked like me, who said, you don't want to mess with that. You need to stay out of that. That's a school board issue. And I'm like, no, that's not a school board issue. That's a community issue. Well, you're going to lose the Senate seat. You're not going to win because they're going to hold that against you because you're getting involved in a school district issue. And I'm like, well, then I'll lose. Like, winning for me doesn't look like what it looks like for most legislators or most elected officials. Winning for me looks like change. And it looks like change for the people, and improvements for the people that I represent. So in a nutshell, that is the way I would describe myself. I like to say that the ABCs of my service are authenticity, boldness, and candor. And I lead with that. Compassion and empathy for people are just, they should be the rule and not the exceptions. They should be just given like baseline, like ground zero, but that hasn't been the case. And until it is, I'm going to keep fighting. And so you're going to probably read more not so nice things about me, because I'm going to say the things that other people won't say, because they need to be said. And I'm going to continue to call people out who look like me and who don't, who run as Democrats and who don't. And that's always been my MO. It's what fuels me. And, my faith teaches me that I don't have anything to fear here with man. There's nothing that they haven't already tried to do to me that they can actually do, because they have done everything they can to silence me. And they've run people every re-election, every time I've been up in the House and the Senate. They promised me that, and they have kept that promise. They don't keep many, but they've kept those promises, and that's fine. I don't mind. I think competition is a great thing, because it keeps elected officials from becoming complacent and believing that this is their seat. The seat belongs to the people of South Carolina. And when the people decide that they no longer want me in this seat fighting for them, I'm fine with that. I will go back to, as I like to jokingly say all the time, making some money, because I have not been able to do that to the extent that I was, before I served. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had in the 12 years that I have served. One was to change our disturbing schools law. Like I said, when the student was thrown out of her desk, everybody kind of threw up their hands and were like, oh, well, law enforcement did that, and the school district, and I'm like, oh, hold up. We're going to hold everybody accountable. There's enough blame to go around, but what do we need to change? And I didn't realize until then that this young lady was really, she was more, what happened to her was more symbolic of the systemic problem that we had in South Carolina before I introduced a new disturbing schools bill that passed overwhelmingly in 2018, because before that, kids were being sent to DJJ. Our students were being sent to DJJ from their classrooms for blowing bubbles in class and clowning in class and just doing what I consider typical or normal classroom misbehavior. And the schools are well equipped to deal with that. I don't condone misbehavior. I don't condone students who talk back to teachers or don't do what they're supposed to do. But I also don't think that it rises to the level of sending them to prison for it. And I learned when that happened to her, I learned that over 30,000 South Carolina students had already been sent into the school to prison pipeline from their classrooms since that law was on the books. And I thought, oh my God, like, we got to change that. Nobody else would touch it. Why? Because, it's a school district issue. But I'm like, yeah, but we are legislators. Like, the law needs to change. And so I introduced the bill in the House, and I quickly learned that law enforcement across South Carolina, their lobbying organizations have much more power than Democratic legislators, at least. And so they lobbied against my bill. And the bill was to simply take the law back to its original intent. That law was put into place to protect our students from outside agitators, from people who come onto the school grounds to do them harm, or to do teachers and administrators and staff members harm. And so knowing that, I'm like, well, that's easy. That's not hard. That's not a hard fix. Let's take it back to why it was originally put in place. And everybody was like resistant. And I had law enforcement officers tell me in the subcommittee meeting in the House, ma'am, representative, we would really appreciate it if you would not remove that tool from our toolboxes. And something just went all through me. It was like I almost had a spontaneous outburst, like Joe Wilson claims he did when he said that, because I'm like, okay, what tool are you referring to? And so I asked him, and he said, the power to arrest. And I thought, wow, we got a long way to go, because I had to enlighten my colleagues and the electorate about why that law needed to change. And they shut it down in the House. I wasn't able to get the bill passed in the House. And I'm not one who's easily deterred. And so I was like, y'all better hope I don't get elected to the Senate. And lo and behold, I got elected to the Senate. And it was the first bill I introduced. And I stayed on it. I went to the Republicans. They fought me initially. I went to them and, just talked to them about what that law looked like in terms of its impact. And we brought students and their families in who looked like the Republican legislators who did not want that bill to pass. And lo and behold, we were able to get it passed. I think it passed unanimously out of the Senate and overwhelmingly in the House. And so I am most proud of that bill, because we will not have 30,000 more students go into the school to prison pipeline, many of whom will never get out. And so, those are just a few. I mean, we won't, I want to save time for questions. I don't know how much time we have, but feel free to ask me anything. If you want to know about my Viagra bill, my Pro-Birth Accountability Act, and some of the other legislation that I've introduced that have not passed, but I'm back now. I'm not running for governor, so I'm gonna get back on some of these issues that will at least encourage us to think out of the box and to kind of build coalitions of support around our women and girls in South Carolina who are struggling more than most, and more than most of us realize they are. Thanks again for having me. I'm happy to take your questions. How long do we have for questions?
Just a few, about 20 minutes.
Very good.
Emily asked, he said, how can you connect and build trust with voters from other parties?
Oh, that's easy. It's not easy actually, but it is possible. And so what I do is, I mean, you have to have relationships with people before you go and talk about legislation. And so I've actually had pretty significant success talking to my Republican colleagues with whom I agree about practically nothing. So, for instance, I introduced a bill that would help those people who are incarcerated, would help kind of reconnect them with, excuse me, their voting rights. Their voting rights are restored once their sentences are completed. But a lot of them don't know that, or a lot of them have been incarcerated so long that they don't know where to vote, they don't know how to vote, they don't understand the process when they went into prison. We might not have had electronic voting machines. So there's just a whole different world that they are, that they will be introduced to upon their release. And so I introduced a bill in the Senate last year, I think it was last year. And the bill seemed like it was just a common sense solution for all of us, Republicans and Democrats alike, right? But as it turns out, I had a colleague from Ori who went to the WIL and said, this is a great bill. And I was like, oh, something's not right about that. Republicans calling my bill great. That was a red flag. So I paid attention. I sat up. He said, this is a great bill. He said, we've just got a technical amendment, and we're going to put the technical amendment on the desk, and it passed on a voice vote. So I didn't even get a chance to see the amendment before the amendment passed, but it was a technical amendment. He said, basically he was trying to improve my bill by making sure that the county election directors were engaged as well, which made sense. I'm like, okay, so because these people are being released into different counties, so they might go to any one of our 46 counties in South Carolina, and every county operates its elections process differently. And so to bring them into the fold made sense to me too. And I was like, oh, great. I appreciated that. So I get home that evening and looked at the amendment, and it was anything but a technical amendment. It did everything but what he said it did. And I just wasn't accustomed to a lawmaker going to the well of the Senate and lying to his colleagues about what it did. I mean, they lie in public every day, but I didn't think that they would exercise that same, that kind of, I just didn't think that he would do that from the well of the Senate when all of our Senate, meetings or sessions are recorded. So I called my committee chair, who is a Republican, who is all about anti-abortion, everything, but I appreciate him because he's straightforward like I am. And he doesn't like it when people lie. He doesn't like it when people, just lie to our faces about something as simple as a technical amendment. I don't know what made me look at it that evening, but I did. And I was so glad that I did, because when I told him that, he was like, well, he couldn't have known that. I said, well, did you know it? He said, no. I said, well, he stood at the well and said that he had run it by the committee and it was a technical amendment, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, that Republican went to bat for me and my bill the very next day. He went to the well. He called his colleague out for lying. And he told me he would handle it, and he did. I was sitting in the balcony at the time because COVID was running rampant, and my colleagues refused to wear masks. And so he referred to my bill, he referred to me, and he said, you know, we can't do this. We can't do this to each other. Like, why would you stand here and say that? That was a lie. You knew it was a lie, and it shut the Senate down. The the majority leader shut it down because he called his Republican colleague a liar from the floor. So those are the things that I appreciate. There are a few of them who, even though we don't believe the same things, we don't have the same values or the same ideologies politically, those are the ones that I do appreciate, at least for being true to who they say they are. That's a rare find these days. And so, you know, when I go to Republicans and try to talk to them about the issues, I found that, you know, I can talk to some of them, including the president of the Senate, Thomas Alexander. Shane Martin was my committee chair, the one who went to the well that day from Spartanburg. Like I said, we don't agree on anything, but the way that I think I got to him was because I went to him when I introduced my disturbing schools bill. He put his name on it as soon as I introduced it. And I went over to him and I asked him why. And he said, well, I gotten a lot of calls about that bill from folks from law enforcement in my district. And I said, well, did you read it? And he said, no, I hadn't looked at it yet. I said, oh, so you put your name on bills that you haven't read yet? He said, well, I'll get around to it, but I'm not gonna, when my people voice their concerns, you know, I've got an issue. And I said, well, could you at least read it first? I said, or is that the way we do things around here? Because I had just gotten to the Senate. And he came over to me and he was like, you know, you were right. I should have read the bill first. I'm going to read it. He didn't take his name off that right after he read it, but he did eventually take his name off. And so we were able to work together from that day. And I ended up being on his committee. He chairs the corrections committee. So, you know, those are the ways that, you know, and I was just being who I am, and that's all I know how to be. But I let him know that I didn't appreciate him putting his name on my bill without reading it first, and then coming to me to see if we could work through the concerns that they had. At the time, I don't think he was willing to do that. I don't think he even thought that I would take that approach because I was so new to the Senate. But I did, and we're very cordial, very helpful to each other, even now. So I like to establish relationships with members of both parties for myself, and not base it on, you know, what I hear them say from the well, or how they vote necessarily, or, you know, how they interact with me, without doing my due diligence and putting some time in to establish a rapport with them.
Okay, then there's several questions here. We're running out of time. Let me see what. I guess the biggest thing I would ask you is, what was your biggest obstacle to running for governor?
Oh, my biggest obstacle to running for governor was, there were several. One was, of course, fundraising. It's not been difficult for me to raise money for my House and Senate seats, but it was extremely difficult for me to raise money for the governor's race. And I believe part of that was because my time was so divided. We were in session, and I felt like I had to get in when I did, because my opponent had already announced, and I needed for people to know that I was running, so that they didn't give all of their, you know, whatever they were going to give to my opponent. One of the other challenges was just that I am a woman and I'm a Black woman rather, and I don't look like anybody else who's ever run. And for me to not recognize that that would be a challenge would, I recognized that very early, even before I announced that that would be an issue. But everywhere I went, people were elated. I mean, they were super excited that I was running. But in the time that I had, given, COVID's ups and downs and me having to be extra careful because I was diagnosed with sickle cell, it really limited my ability to get to the people, all of the people that I needed to see. And, so I'm serving in the Senate, and we were in session. I'm trying to make my way around to get to all of the 46 counties, to meet and engage with people. I'm trying to build my team out because it was hard to find people who had that experience, who didn't want like so much money to run the campaign. And, so we had enough money to operate and to do the things that we needed to do in terms of just outreach and continuing to build the team out, but we didn't have enough to go on TV. We didn't, so those were the challenges that I felt like I had most. And I was the only woman in the race. But I was also the only one with experience in the race. And so trying to make sure I highlighted the differences between me and my opponents, primarily the one in Charleston who became the nominee, was a little challenging too, because he already had the name recognition in Charleston and in other parts of the state because he won 2 years to Congress. But he also had the backing of the Democratic Governors Association and other organizations that either stayed out of our race because he was running, or they low-key backed him with resources and, finances that I just did not have access to. And so those are some of the things, in retrospect, that I wish I had been a little more cognizant of. I thought that things were at least on equal footing starting out of the gate, but they just weren't. And then, with the party kind of did the same thing that the Democratic Governors Association did, and the DNC and those national organizations that he had been, he had relationships with that I simply did not, because of his time in Congress. And so, those were the challenges, the biggest challenges.
What would you say, how would you encourage women to run for office? Based on what you just talked about as far as the challenges goes, would you encourage, and would you do it again?
I would do it again. I have always been very candid about the challenges, and not just, of course, the governor's race was statewide, so that presented a whole different set of challenges for me that I had not encountered in my runs for the House and Senate. And as I said on the campaign trail, I never lost a race. And I don't attribute that to my being a woman necessarily, or I attribute my wins to my willingness to be outspoken when others won't. And the fact that people know that they have a fighter when they support me. They know that I'm accessible. I am, and I'm willing to lead even when I have to do it alone. And so I would encourage women who are serious about change and who have that fire and that passion for doing the right thing for the right reasons to run. Nobody said it would be easy, but it is possible. And I'm living proof that it is possible. Somebody who grew up in rural South Carolina, who has a chronic health condition that has limited my ability to move in certain spaces, especially during the pandemic. Somebody who is divorced and a single mother of two. At the time when I ran, my sons were much younger. They were in grade school. I don't remember the grades specifically, but I was holding my youngest son's hand when we went into Kershaw County and had people refuse to shake mine. So, you know, I wanted them to see though, and to understand the reality of what we are facing and why I'm running, because we shouldn't, you know, that was in 2010, but it was still in 20 something. And why is it that, you know, racism still rules in South Carolina? And why is it that we still have the haves and the have-nots, and people are okay with that? And we still have legislators who don't care enough about certain populations of people in this state to make the systemic changes that we need to make. And so, you know, I would encourage, I want to keep it real with everybody. Is it easy? Absolutely not. Is it doable? Yes. Is it rewarding? Absolutely. When we get to change the lives of people and to have people look at me in the eye at when I was running for governor and when I've been running for the House and Senate and say, you know, if you can do this, given the things that I know about you, and the things that should cause you to say, no, I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Or no, I don't think, let me do this first. Let me, you know, and as women, we tend to do that. We do that to ourselves and each other. We say, oh, you know, you might want to wait until you, get another degree or get a degree, or you might want to wait until you get your name out there first, or, you know, but that you don't have to do any of that. You just need to have a heart for people and the drive to make it work for you, and not listen to the naysayers who say, I had people tell me, you know, don't drive your nice car into Kershaw County. They don't need to think that you're rich or you're wealthy. And I wasn't either. But they will, you know, not support you because, I'm like, well, they're not going to support me because of my car. They weren't going to support me anyway. And that's just the approach that I took. Or they told me, you're going to need to be at this coffee shop from 7 a.m. You know, you're going to need to be on the campaign trail basically from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. every day. And I couldn't do that because I was raising my sons by myself and they were in school. And I'm like, they're not running for office. I am. And the lady who was my campaign manager at the time said, well, you won't win. And I said, well, then I'll lose, but I have to lose on my terms. And I'm fine with that. But, you know, and I went into Kershaw County, which is where she was telling me not to go. I drove my car. I went to people's homes. I sat down with them if they allowed me to, in their living rooms and in their homes and at their kitchen tables. And I told them, hey, look, I'm running because I want to improve this district. I want to improve your life. I want you to thrive. And it's possible, but I won't be at every neighborhood association meeting, and I won't be able to come every single time you call. I'll come as much as I can, but I need for you to understand that my boys come first. And when I could take them with me, I did. And when I couldn't, I didn't. But, you know, I just told people the truth so that they wouldn't have all these expectations of me, you know, if I did win, and I did, thinking that I was going to put everything aside and be at every event that they invited me to. And it worked out. People want the truth, even if they don't agree with it. I've had people who would never agree with me politically say, you know what, I just voted for you, or I would support you simply because you told me the truth when I asked you. You didn't lie, you didn't sugarcoat it. You told me the truth. After the elections debacle of 2012, I had a gentleman who walked up to me and 5 guys in Harbison. I don't even represent Irmo or that area. And he walked over to me, and it kind of, you know, took me by surprise a little bit. He said, "Are you Mia?" And I was like, I think so. I was almost afraid to say, yeah. I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I just want to shake your hand." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "If I lived in your district, I would vote for you." He said, "Now I've voted Republican all my life." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you stood up for the people. When you fought the elections commission," he said, "and I didn't see nobody standing with you." And I said, "You're right." I said, "I didn't have many people standing with me at the time." I said, "But I would do it again." He said, "Well, if I ever move, I'm gonna move into your district." And, you know, we laughed, but I appreciate that. And it taught me that we don't have to be chameleons, you know, trying to be everything to everybody. We just need to be ourselves. And that is particularly true for women who run and genuinely want to serve the people.
Well,
Barbara, I think you had a question. I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
we're kind of out of time.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
I had to find my unmute button. I only wanted to say that men rarely ask the internal kinds of questions or external questions that women do about their skills, their capability. You know, I looked good in the mirror this morning, so I think I'll run for the Senate. So kudos to you for all that you have done and your braveness, but also your willingness to put a little humor in it. And I mentioned this in the chat a little earlier, but when you introduced the bill to ban vasectomies in for state health because they were trying to ban contraceptives for women from the state
No,
health
I
plan.
introduced the Viagra bill, not the
Viagra. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I knew.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was called the erectile dysfunction bill, but yeah,
Sorry.
I did that. And I had no idea that it would get the national attention that it received, or the international attention. I was asked by international media outlets to do interviews on that bill. And it just proved to me that, you know, I mean, what we're grappling with in South Carolina is really not very different. And we know that now, of course, if I didn't know it then, than what, you know, other states are dealing with. So thank you, Barb. I am definitely authentic when it comes to my service and just trying to do what I can do to improve the lives of the people of Senate District 22 and all of South Carolina, because when I cast my vote in the Senate, that vote impacts every South Carolinian. And so that too kind of led me to run for governor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it looks like it's right around 1 o'clock. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Thank you so much, Senator McLeod, for joining us today. It's wonderful. We appreciate all your wisdom that you shared with us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and please invite me back.
Absolutely.
Okay. You ladies have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.